One of the things that I have difficulty with when writing scripts for this channel is whether to describe a place as a city or a town. Now, that might sound weird because surely these are very basic terms that have very easy translations, right? Well, no, because different countries have different ways of categorizing settlements. Not just different languages, different countries. Within the English-speaking world, there are many different ways of defining what a city is. For example, a common definition used by many people is any settlement with a population of over 100,000. But some bodies, such as, for example, the European Commission and the UN, now define a city as a densely populated settlement with a population of at least 50,000. This definition was adopted in 2020, so it's quite recent. But there are officially much smaller cities. For example, I grew up near England's second smallest city with a population of 10,000. So small, in fact, that in the movie Hot Fuzz, it was used as a location for a fictional village. That's because in the UK, city status has nothing to do with size. A city is a city if the monarch made it a city. And what is England's smallest city? Well, surprisingly, London. What we normally think of as London is actually two cities plus a whole lot of other towns all merged together. But the actual city of London itself is just one of those two cities, and because it's mostly banks and offices, it has a very small population. In the US, each state has its own definition of city, which sounds unnecessarily complicated, but it actually makes sense. Some states have very large, densely populated urban areas, and other states are vast empty spaces with just a few small settlements. And when defining what a city is, it usually makes sense to consider not just how big it is, but how important it is for the area. There is a reason that we always talk about a capital city and never a capital town. The capital of Wyoming, for example, is Cheyenne, which has a population of just 65,000. So already we can see the problem. Aschaffenburg is slightly larger than Cheyenne with a population of 70,000. But how many of you would say that that makes it a city? That depends on how city is defined in your area. In Germany, there are basically two types of settlement. A Stadt is any settlement that has been officially recognized as a Stadt, and everything else is a mere Gemeinde. There are differences between the states about what can be given Stadt status, but the status is basically meaningless. Historically, the granting of Stadt status gave the place certain privileges, such as the right to build defensive walls. But in modern Germany, the only real benefit is that it can call itself a Stadt. But a Stadt that is big enough to look after some of its own affairs may be granted a special status. Perhaps the most common of these is Kreisfreie Stadt, which I like to translate for historical reasons as urban district. It's independent of any Landkreis, which I usually translate as rural district. But there are some semi-official terms for different types of settlement based on population, and here they are. And I'm almost certain I've done this before in a previous video, but I can't for the life of me find it. I'm sure at least one of you will, but there's no harm in repeating it. Colloquially, Germans might refer to any very large city as Großstadt and everything else as Stadt. But for reasons I've already explained, I'm not actually very happy with simply translating those terms as city and town respectively. So what, for me, is a city? Well, when talking about German settlements, I'm happy to go along with the UN's idea. 50,000 people living quite close together, especially if the place is important to a wider area. This makes Aschaffenburg, which is officially a Stadt, a city. It has a population significantly over 50,000, it has businesses that serve many towns and villages in a wide area, and it is a significant transport hub for that area. By contrast, Alzenau, also officially a Stadt, has a population of about 19,000, and its businesses serve a much smaller area with no department stores or anything of that nature. So I'm going to call that a town. And if anyone has any objection to that, I have the UN on my side. I grew up near so small, in fact, that it was used in I, for example, grew up near a it is that it can call itself a Stadt. What is going on now?